Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sprint 191 review. This sprint was a normal 2-week sprint, although we did have July 4th holiday in there, as well as the Canada Day holiday. I'll start with the overview. Jeffrey will follow with the UI, Adam on providers, Joe on the platform, and Keenan on the API. As you can see, this sprint 191, there was quite an uptick in the number of PRs merged. This is mainly due to a PR blast out to update the GitHub Actions timeout on the setup Ruby, which will be mentioned a little later. But that ended up going into every single application as well as gem repository that we have. And you can see that reflected here in the purple other label in the closed PRs by label graph. Otherwise, it was a relatively normal sprint. You can see the same number of bugs and enhancements from the previous sprint. And over to Jeffrey for the UI.
Good morning. In this sprint, 17 PRs got merged into the UI Classic repo, out of which 7 are bugs, 4 enhancement, 3 refactoring, and 3 others. I can explain about them in the following slides. A warning pop-up appeared on the new host init form while pressing the add button under the custom manually entered WWPNs. Auto SDT made a small fix by adding a label to the text field component in the schema file. And next. Multiple summary pages was rendered at the bottom of this page, making the components overlap with the submit buttons. Earlier, we had a fix. We had an issue for the PDF prints not working, and the fix for that caused this current issue. So we made a new fix for both of these issues here. Next. In overview reports and saved reports, the notification drawers were overlapping with the data table toolbars. A symbol CSS change was made to fix this issue. Next. In the copy dashboard form, when the select groups was changed, and then when we submit the form, instead of its value, the entire key value object was passed, causing the validations to fail. Gilbert made a fix for this by adding a symbol value true property to the select dropdown component. Next. The file size validation was not correctly being checked, causing the error to always be shown and preventing the user from submitting the form. Gilbert fixed this by making additional checks in its validation files. Next. Resource pool widgets under the storage manager dashboard was broken, probably because of the conversion from Angular to React. An external developer fixed this by making few additional checks and refactoring the code. A feature bug was missing for the firmware registries and VM write size recommendations. The permission checks were made in another PR, but Gilbert made a fix for this by making sure that the right roles were assigned to its buttons. Next. Before when you change the language on the settings page and click save, the manage IQ will still be in the old language until you reload the page or navigate to a new page, which will then show everything in the new language. Now, when you change the language on the settings page and click save, the page should now reload and everything should be translated to the new language that you have selected. Next, an external developer added a management console button in the cloud instances by provider. Next, a cloud volume clone feature was also added in this PR by an external developer. Oh, yeah. Could you please go back one slide? Yeah, for this, the Explorer left menu was removed for services page. Dependent PRs were also merged. What we're seeing is just a list page. So we have also converted the show, edit, and remove services from the inventory models, set ownership forms, and the set remove retirement date forms. Yeah, next. These three PRs are related to the select box passing the object of key value. Gilbert fixed all of them by passing only just the value. Yeah, that's all from my end. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So this sprint for providers and core, we moved a couple associations for SCSI targets and SCSI LUNs out of the VMware provider and up to the core infra manager. This is going to unblock the HMC provider to start tracking multipath IO using these two models in the future. We also fixed a bug where the foreign key for the WWPN candidates model was incorrect when the belongs to EXE Management System Association. The foreign key is actually MSID, and that wasn't being specified, so the default was used, and that was blocking some other core provider refactoring, but it was also a bug in its own right. For Power VS, we fixed an issue where the IAM error message that was returned from the IBM Cloud API was blank, and so it wasn't obvious to the user what the failure was. We also fixed some exception handler classes where we're catching exceptions from REST client, which isn't used with the more recent Power VS gem that we're now using. For Power HMC, Kalista added support for provisioning VMs from templates. Previously, there was support for creating a template from a VM, and so now he's completed the other half of that, which is provisioning a VM from a template. Next slide. For Terraform, Jason fixed an issue where there are strings referencing MCM, which is a previous product, and now it's switched to reference the Cloud Pak. For OpenShift, Keenan improved the external logging supports feature. This had some logic in core, which was essentially checking for a method that was only defined in OpenShift. And so he was able to clean that up by just moving the supports directly down to OpenShift and then remove any of the response to checks. For OpenStack, we improved the event monitor availability check. So previously it was checking to see if the event catcher should start up by running an API call that was executed during the in the MIQ server context, which shouldn't have to have access to the provider in order to run. It also slows it down by quite a bit. So we moved that out to the verified credentials method, which runs on a schedule, and we're persisting it to the database so that MIQ server is able to check values only in VMDB without having to hit the provider directly. We also fixed a bug with Ceilometer event endpoint creation, which was introduced when we did the DDF form parameters. Essentially, Ceilometer doesn't have any explicit endpoint information, and so it wasn't creating anything in the endpoints table, and it was sharing authentication. So if you use Ceilometer, there was no indication that that was the type of event handler that should be used. Next slide. For Oracle Cloud, Melody fixed some issues with database creation using DDF parameters. So previously it was looking for symbols in all the parameters, but when this is being called via the API, all the parameters come down with string keys. So she fixed that, as well as a couple other minor issues with the schema. We also fixed an issue where deleted databases, which are still shown in the Oracle Cloud UI, were still being collected. And so it wasn't obvious in ManageIQ that they were deleted. They showed up just like every other database. So we're now skipping any which have the state of deleted. And for VMware, we added a setting to allow ESXi servers to be added directly, which was a request from a community user that they wanted to do for testing. They didn't have access to a vCenter in their testing environment, and they wanted to test with ESXi, even though it's not supported for a production run. And that's it for providers. Over to Joe.
Okay, so for enhancements, Keenan renamed params for update to avoid a model and API conflict, and it also better aligns with the implementation. He also converted external logging from a supports with a conditional to a simpler supports not, and that allows subclasses to better deal with that complexity. Jason made running build simpler by using intelligent defaults for the baster and repo parameters, if not provided. He also shrunk the image sizes by avoiding installation of unnecessary dependencies, and then having another pull request that actually specified of these weak dependencies, which ones we actually need. He also continued to shrink the image sizes by cleaning up unnecessary files. Then Adam updated Kafka to 3.2.0 as that version drop log4j. Brandon added the Arch and source RPMs. That allows us to have easier maintenance and be able to do fixes easier since we have these sources and the RPM spec within the source RPM. And finally, I upgraded the developer gem boot snap, which provides faster Rails booting, to use the newer versions of Psych 3 and 4. Next slide, please. For bugs, Gilbert and Adam fixed an issue with authentications where you were configured them to run with a different privilege escalation, such as sudo or su. This previously wasn't fully supported in the API due to how we were storing some of this information. So now you could properly specify this or specify none at all. Melody added the missing async delete mixin to Cloud Database so that she continued work on adding CRUD operations for cloud databases. Keenan made some test improvements all over the place, some around making sure we use a similar method for creating servers. He tried to fix a sporadic test failure around clearing the API token store. And also he removed test parallelization, which was originally added years ago when we had several less repositories and the test suites took much longer. We no longer had that with GitHub Actions, so we haven't been using it. So he removed it and we can bring it back if we need it. Finally, Frank made some fixes in the translations. I provided a updated English pot file with some of the newer translations from our source code, and he made some fixes and added some translations that were missing. On to Keenan for the REST API.
Cool. So the main changes, we fixed the way we handle a params for create. It's different across providers. And so we weren't properly able to, through HTTP options, provide the dynamic form definitions. We were running into this for cloud database. So it will fix it there and also across the board. Okay, on to, I guess, Jason, for closing comments.
Yep, that's it. Thanks, everyone. So that's the end of our Sprint 191 review. The Sprint 192 review will be on July 27th at the usual place and time. Just want to say thank you to all of the presenters today, all of the contributors over the last sprint, and also all the people opening the great discussions in our GitHub discussions forum. If you have any questions, please open questions there. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.